What's going on, everybody? It is TripleCrown24 back today, and I want to talk about value boxes. Big shout out to Kid over at Bean's Ball Card Blog. Go check him out on all your socials. He was the one who suggested this video topic in my last video, and I thought that it would be more beneficial to make a video about it rather than just typing out a long comment. And what I'm going to go over today is how I have developed my value boxes over the years. If you're not familiar with me, I've been a dealer for 4+ years now, and I've worn many different hats in the value box arena. I've had 10-cent boxes, 25-cent, 50-cent, 3 for $1 boxes, priced as marked boxes. I've had them sorted by player, sorted by team, and not sorted at all. I've had a whole bunch of different sports that I've used, and kind of what I have settled with at the moment, I have found to be my most successful overall. And how do I define success? Well, there's really 3 objectives that I keep in mind when I am making my value boxes. This is not gospel by any means. There might be more. In fact, there probably is that I'm missing, but these are kind of the rules that I play by. The first one is that my objective is to move as many cards as possible for as much as possible. And it seems pretty straightforward, right? Move more cards, make more money. Yeah, sure. But at the same time, there comes a delicate balance that you might not consider. If you're selling a bunch of cards at 10 cents each, that's great. But could you realistically be getting 25 cents, 50 cents, or even $1 a piece out of those cards? Well, if you're moving enough cards where you could theoretically say, yes, I could get those for that price, that's leaving a lot of money on the table. And also, if you're selling a bunch of 10-cent cards, it's going to take a lot to be able to keep the boxes restocked and to acquire them for that cost going forward, which is something to keep in mind. On the other side of the coin, you don't want to price gouge. You don't want to try to milk every penny that you can out of people, because it's going to probably turn a lot of people off of your value boxes. Meaning that, you don't want to try to stretch $1 cards into $3 cards. Usually that means they're going to be stagnant. And stagnant boxes are a recipe for disaster. It's all about finding that perfect balance. Number 2 of my objectives is to justify the table space. This ties into what I just said. If you are spending your time to get your boxes all set up at whatever cost you may be putting in, whether that be supply cost or the actual acquisition of the cards, you want to make sure that they are producing enough to justify you setting up at a show. At most shows, a table is going to run you, what, 30, 40, 50 bucks? You want to make sure that, especially if your value box is the only thing on that specific table, that it is generating enough revenue to not only justify your time, but also justify the cost that you need to even set it up on that table. And the last thing, this one is more important if you are someone who is going to be doing this regularly and setting up your boxes regularly, is that you want to develop a reputation for having good boxes. If people know that you have fair prices on your value boxes and you have good quality stuff in there, they will keep coming back. And a loyal following to your value boxes is something that will help you in the long run. It will develop good relationships and ultimately will help you develop regulars at shows. And going with those 3 objectives, we kind of now look at our audience of who we are dealing with. And I can break most people down into 4 categories. This isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. There might be some overlap in there. There might be people who don't quite fit into any of these, but for the most part, I generally find that most people fit into these 4 categories when going into value boxes. Number 1 is the player and team collectors. They're only looking for cards of their favorite player or team. And because of that, as you can see on your screen, I have my boxes set up by team for that reason, because I find that it's easy to identify where the cards are of that specific team or that specific player. For example, a football player I get asked about a lot is Tyreek Hill, which means that a lot of kids especially, they'll like to go to the Dolphins section to try to find Tyreek Hill. If not, then they'll head over to the Chiefs section. But it makes it quick, makes it simple, and they know exactly where to go, where to find it. So player and team collectors is your first one. Somewhat in the same vein, number 2 is your set builders. They are the ones who have their notepads and their pen and paper ready to go. They are building insert sets. They're building parallel sets. They're looking for very specific cards, and they have a list, and they're hoping to knock it out And a lot of times I'll have people ask me if I have any cards from a certain product or insert set because I know that they are set builders and that's specifically what they're looking for. The third one is your flippers. These are the people who they don't really want to look for anything specific in these boxes. They are just looking for something to sell for more at some point. Now, some of these guys are the ones who will try to buy out your entire boxes. Some of these guys will try to get a bulk discount if they're picking out large quantities of cards. And I would say, if it's someone who is buying in volume, you definitely want to try to work with them. That doesn't mean give away your stuff, of course, but that also means if they're willing to offer you quite a bit to move a large amount, especially if it's a lot of cards that are stagnant or have been in your boxes for a long amount of time, I think it's definitely worth something that you want to consider very strongly. The last one is kids. And now kids kind of fall into all of these categories to some extent, maybe not as much on the set building, but kids and also parents who are buying for their kids. It's the holiday season when I'm recording this. Perhaps you have parents who are looking to get some stocking stuffers, some little cards to put into their kids' stockings of their favorite player. And kids usually, I find they're for the most part, they want to try to trade. Maybe they open up a blaster, they want to trade some of their cards out. I don't have a problem doing that as long as, it's fair. I'm not going to try to take advantage of kids trying to trade into value boxes. They just want to get cards of their favorite team or player with what they already have. And since they don't have any discretionary income coming in other than allowance, I try to cater to them as much as possible, especially if they're nice and respectful about it. But a lot of times kids, they just want the cards of their favorite players, especially young kids. They don't care if it's a base card. If it's shiny and it's their favorite player, a lot of times that's good enough for them. Those are your four kind of core categories. And admittedly, I have probably fallen into all four of those categories at some point in time, and perhaps a little bit of overlap in there as well. Now that we kind of know what we are trying to do and who we are trying to appeal to, we can actually build our boxes. And here are really my 3 tips that I say that you want to live by with these. Number 1 is organization. I get complimented every single show about how my boxes are organized by team. And it might not seem like too much, but it really does go a long way because if you think about it, again, go back to the audience. If you have player or team collectors, take me for example. Say that when I was super collecting Miggy, I'm looking for Miggy cards in your boxes. Well, I want to go straight to the Tigers and the Marlins sections. I don't want to mess around looking through Diamondbacks cards or Yankees cards. I want to look through the cards of my team so that I can easily find the cards that I want. That's why I think organization is so key. If you only want to do specific star players as well, I've seen a lot of people do that where maybe they have, for example, here locally in Cincinnati, there's a Joe Burrow section or a Jamar Chase section. And then you have your popular players. So there's probably a Tom Brady section, Patrick Mahomes selection, et cetera, where people can go through and look for cards of those specific players. Both ways, I think, perfectly suffice. It just kind of depends on how you have your boxes set up. But you want to have them organized in some way, even if you can only do it by sport. If you're not going to be doing shows too often, I think sport automatically is going to give you a slight advantage over different value boxes in the room because you're going to have at least some organization. And if nothing else, have it priced. Have it priced somehow. For me, all of my cards in here, regardless of what they're marked, are 2 for $1. That is the price point that I run with. If you only buy one card, it's $1. I tell you, you can go pick out another one, but I always say it rounds up to the nearest whole dollar. Easy for me to say. And because of that, usually people will pick out 2 cards at a time if they only want to get a couple and spend $1 on it. But everything is priced that way. I think one of the most annoying things that you could tell someone is it kind of just depends, build a stack and I'll give you a price. Well, what I pick out is going to really depend on what price you tell me. And it's not just because maybe I'm a flipper going up to the table. I've seen it too with set builders where they don't want to spend all that time to dig stuff out for you all of a sudden to drop on them. Yeah, this is $5 a card. Well, they only wanted to pay $1 a card. So they wasted all that time pulling that stuff out. Probably means they're not going to come back to your box again. That's something that you don't want. Have it priced. Even if it's some kind of loose-based system, you don't have to individually price every card. You wanna just say, "This is my quarter box, this is my dime box," whatever the case may be. Make sure it's priced, make sure it's organized, and make sure that it is clearly understood to people out there. I do get this question a lot is, well, you have your boxes priced all or organized all nicely here. Aren't people going to mess them up? Yes. Inevitably, people do come through and they don't keep it in order. Even though you can put signs up, you can tell people to please keep it in order. It's going to happen. And what I kind of equate it to is say you are painting the interior of your house. It's gonna take probably a whole weekend to do it, right? Depending on the size of your house. I have a smaller house, so it takes an entire weekend to kinda do it. You gotta put a lot of time and effort in. You gotta put the time and effort and even the cost in of going to get the supplies to even paint the house and picking out the paint and all that. And there might be patches on the wall at some point that need to be fixed up at a later point in time. But if you take that one weekend to paint the house and you just set aside that time to get it all done, really after that, it's routine maintenance. When you're patching up certain spots, it's not going to take forever to do that. It's certainly not going to take as much time as it originally did. That's kind of what I tell people is that if you can spend one weekend just getting your boxes ready to go, that's all you really need. I know it can be hard to find that time, but if you're going to do it in the long run, I think it is definitely worth it to get it set up and find the time to do that. It will help you make more in the long run and move more cards in the long run. The second thing is you want to consider your cost. You'll see in there that my cards are all penny sleeved. I don't do unsleeved cards and I don't do top loaded cards because at the 50-cent price point that I'm selling them at, generally speaking, even if I buy used top loaders, I'm going to have to pay about 10 to 15 cents a piece on the low end. Generally speaking, it's going to be closer to 25 cents a piece on top loaders most of the time, especially if you're buying new top loaders. And you're going to go through them pretty quickly. You can imagine how many cards are in this box alone. Can you imagine how many top loaders that would take? And at 50 cents a piece, half my cost is going to just getting the top loaders for the cards. I would say if it's $1 and up, that's when you want to start including top loaders in for especially the flipper category, but anybody who sells cards, they will definitely value the top loaders. I would say if you have $1 box, you can probably get away with putting a few more things in there because the top loaders themselves are part of the value that those people are getting out of buying those cards. At least that's something that I consider when I'm looking to buy out a box. I usually pay a little bit more if there are top loaders because I need them. I'm going to use them at some point in time. For me, though, just using the penny sleeves, I buy my penny sleeves in bulk. They're usually about 0.75 cents a piece. That's not really cutting into my profits too much. The last thing that you want to consider is pricing your cards accordingly. I think this is the big one. How do I price my cards for my value boxes and what do I put into my value boxes? I'm going to show you here. Let me move over. This is my Bengals section of my box. You can see it's very light, and that's because it usually gets picked over a lot. And you'll notice that there's different price stickers again. All of these are 2 for $1. Let me just thumb through a little bit, and you'll see kind of what I have in my boxes here. You'll see it's a very wide variety of different sets and products. Certain ones that are kind of clustered here, you can probably surmise that I got them all from the same place, and perhaps I bought out someone's box who had a lot of this stuff. But at the 50-cent price point, what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for color. I'm looking for refractors or silver prisms. I'm looking for some lower end numbered stuff. Now, I sell a lot on COMC. I used to do quite a bit on eBay. I have links to those down below if you want to see exactly what I am selling. But I don't always put all my stuff that I have specifically earmarked for those sites into these boxes. This is the stuff that I think is not worthwhile, but it's not exactly down to a T. And what do I mean by that is that there might be a few cards in here that perhaps would be worthwhile for me to send to a COMC, or if you're an eBay standard envelope seller, worthwhile for you to put up on eBay. Well, I don't need to milk every single cent possible out of every single card, as I mentioned earlier on. And I will sometimes put little Easter eggs in there just to get people excited. And that way that they can know that there's going to be some good stuff in these boxes, right? It's not just me trying to unload all my quote unquote junk to people. So there's a look at the Bengals section. I'm going to actually be adding more to it today because I had a show coming up this weekend. I pulled a few cards out that I wanted to point out here. These are new from the 2023 Prestige product. You'll see here. This is it's an insert with Burrow and Chase on it, a T Higgins base, some parallels here. One thing I will say is that in terms of star base cards for my 50-cent box, I will put them in there, and I tend to be a little bit more lenient when it comes to teams that have a local interest, specifically the Cincinnati teams in my area. If I lived in Dallas, Texas, would I put a T Higgins card into my 50-cent box, just a base card like this? No, I would not. But here with the Bengals, I will put them in there, and especially Joe Burrow stuff like this, because a lot of times I'll find a lot of people will put $4, $5, $6 a piece on any Joe Burrow card that they have. I typically only will do that on my rookies. I usually put $5 a piece on my rookies because they are priced competitively. They have come down. I've seen more of them at shows now for $3, maybe even $2, which I think is a lot more realistic. So I'll have to adjust my prices accordingly. But that also ties into the strategy as well, is that I kind of have a general idea of what the various value boxes in the room are going to look like. And that's something to consider as well, is that you are, in a sense, competing against everyone else that has a value box at a show. And there is only a finite amount of time to kind of go through a box. Imagine I showed you my box there. I have 4 boxes like that at any given point at a show. If you wanted to go through all of those cards, can you imagine how much of your show floor time it would take to go through all that? It means that it's got to be pretty good for you to want to dedicate all that time, or you got to be pretty set that this is the table where you want to spend your money at for the show. So keeping that in mind is that people only have a finite amount that they're looking to spend at the shows, and they also have a finite amount of time to look for cards at the shows. And I find that having my stuff organized by team, by sport, and then having it where people can kind of go through and know that there's going to be some quality stuff in there, it's going to incentivize them to use their time to go through my boxes. So that's 3 things in terms of pricing the cards accordingly. Little 3 bonus tips there, I guess, is that consider the different boxes at the show, that you are pricing yourselves competitively with them. You want to consider what people are looking for in terms of their local team interest and also their time. I'll throw one bonus thing in there. Consider the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And perhaps you're someone who doesn't spend a lot of time in value boxes. That's fair. But regardless if you do or don't, kind of consider what you would want to find in value boxes. I do like to, from time to time, I will rip the odd blaster just so I have some fodder from new products to put into my value boxes. I want to say that ripping wax just to fill up your value boxes is a terrible way to fill them up and acquire the inventory. Don't do that. But I will rip a blaster probably like once a month that is specifically for getting cards for my value boxes from new products, just to show that, hey, I am getting new stuff in here and I am getting new cards in all the time, which is true. It's not just some kind of illusion. I do buy like these prestige cards. These did not come from a blaster. These came from a collection that I purchased, but showing that I have a new set in there, albeit it's prestige. It's not the most exciting set. It's not the most coveted set out there, but people will see that and they'll know that, hey, there is some new stuff in there. And there's also some old stuff in there. You can see I have quite the variety in my boxes, but it lets people know that it's not just going to be the same thing over and over again when they come back to the table. That is my somewhat comprehensive guide to my value boxes. I hope that you found it helpful. If you want to share any of your own tips in the comments section down below, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to learn a thing or two myself, but I hope everyone found that helpful. Take care, stay safe, be kind.